What's up, you beautiful chuds? Welcome to the Let's Talk Horror channel. Welcome to the Creepzone, and welcome to my side series, Tales from the Creepzone, where I am going through every episode of every season of the Tales from the Crypt series. I am really enjoying going through this series once again. As I said, it's been something that I have truly loved throughout my existence. It is one of the things that really truly started me on my journey through horror as a kid. The iconography of what Tales from the Crypt is something that is so important to me personally, and I know that it is for so many people. So as I always say, I was going to go through them all again, and now they're on Shudder. You can do that as well, so you can go through the episodes with me or whenever you bloody want. But that's, why not bring you on the journey with me? So I am going to be going through the next 3 episodes, which is going to be 13, 14, and 15 of season 2. That's where we are already. We're sort of getting through them. And season 2 is really being interesting because, like I say, like season 1, 6 episodes. Season 2, I think like 18 episodes. So we're nearly at the end of season 2 and we keep going forward. But there's a lot of more episodes to keep going through, but I'm enjoying it, and I hope that you are too. So let's get into the first one of this episode, episode 13. So episode 13 is called Corman's Calamity. Jim Corman, a repressed comic book artist who discovers his horrific monster drawings are materializing in the real world. This supernatural power is triggered by experimental fertility pills that his tyrannical wife Mildred has been forcing him to take. This episode is an interesting one. Why? Because I absolutely bloody love it, which is, if you go off the previous episode, there might be some controversies in it, and it'd be interesting once again. This is why it's so interesting not knowing what anybody else thinks about it, because I don't know whether this is like one of the ones that I think is absolutely brilliant and other people don't, but also I can't see why people wouldn't love this episode. I mean, if you don't, well, then you don't. I mean, it's mental, but you don't. But this episode, I mean, straight away it gets super meta because where we're at, the Tales from the Crypt, we're in a Tales from the Crypt episode, which is about they're doing an edition of a Tales from the Crypt comic. Like you're in the offices of Tales from the Crypt, so it's already like super meta, which I absolutely bloody love. It just feels, it's different from what we've had before, right? And it's fun. It makes it, a little bit more like, oh, okay, like they see themselves, so to speak. Like it's just fun. I like already. You're like, this is a good fun start because you're sort of, not that it is the real offices of Tales from the Crypt, but it's still fun. You have the wife, the main character, his wife is obviously just, a flat out arsehole in this, isn't she? And she's got a dumbass hat. And she's just a flat out like not very nice person. Of course, like we always have in Tales from the Crypt, we have these people that aren't very nice. But it's also interesting as we go through this, our main character, because when this episode starts out, you just think that it's like going to be that sort of generic, sort of relationship where one of the people in the relationship, whether it's the wife or the husband, is like an arsehole, and the other one is sort of like, the pushover, so to speak. But as we go through this episode, and that's what this makes this episode really good and very well written, and makes it feel a bit more unique and different, is as we go through it, well, things are a little bit different when it comes to this main character, or the way that the people that were writing it may have thought differently to like how I look at it when I'm watching it, and I'm like, yeah, we see. But as we go through it, we go through it. Also, the wife as well. Once again, could just be me, but she did remind me a little bit of Joan Cusack in the Addams Family. When she's in the Addams Family movie, she reminded me a bit of Joan Cusack, which once again could all be me. But there's a bit, so there is a bit where there's the other love interest, which, as I said, happened throughout this episode, which makes it once again, a bit more unique and different in regards to how they're putting that in, or how this main character, we're supposed to be on the journey with a good person with this one, and how you look at that sort of like person throughout the episode. There is a female, there's a bit in the laundrette when obviously at one point it does absolutely all fucking kick off. But she goes full John Wick, because there's like a washing machine monster, and we get some decapitation in this one as well. Not her, but the monster, the washing machine monster, whatever you want to call it. But she goes full John Wick at one point. Once again, it makes it really fun. Well, also, it's interesting how every time that there's like, especially like in the 90s or like 80s and stuff, everybody who wears a cop uniform, it never, for some reason, it just never feels like real, because it always looks like they're like from Police Academy. Like, it just looks like everything is set in the world of Police Academy, and then one of the cops is from there is going to turn up. So that always makes me laugh when you see these, because I like now it just doesn't like sort of feel or look like that, so to speak. Maybe we don't get as much cop movies anymore. I don't know, but yeah, every time I'm like, oh, it's just someone from Police Academy, which always makes me laugh. But this, as I said, is a really fun concept. It's really shot well. I really like the lighting in this. Once again, a big part of what all of this is and for me to love anything, not just Tales from the Crypt, it has to have something that is structured well. It has to be something that is visually nice and pleasing to look at as well. I really enjoy looking at the movies or episodes or whatever I'm watching on a technical level, and this is one of those episodes that sort of like nails sort of things on a technical level. Like, it's, as I said, shot well. The lighting's very good. You might have like the horror moments of the lighting, where they're putting the greens and the reds and so on like that to go like old school sort of horror. Or it's just like creatively put together. But then also with this one, you get like the multi layers of the story. You get the multi layers of the characters. You think that you for once following somebody that's actually like quite a good character. He's just got a wife that's being mean to him, but of course he's making decisions throughout this with the other female character that actually you're like, actually you're quite an arsehole, because you're having an affair with like your wife, basically, like, and the way that he's handling that and dealing with that and not talking to her, not telling her, and all that sort of stuff. Like, he's not the perfect example of a good person who's dealing with somebody that's not very nice. He's also a flawed person himself, and we see that throughout the episode as he sort of like gets sort of worse. I mean, the fact that he literally as we go through it, he lets his wife essentially get killed by a bloody monster just so he can now go off with this new person. He's not a good guy, but it sort of ends like he does, and that's why it's quite interesting writing, because you think to yourself, the people that are writing it, were they just men that thought this was the right way of doing it? They're like, well, she's not very nice to him, so let him just go and have a floozy with someone else, and that's the way that life and the way that he should be dealing with it. I don't know, but it's not, obviously, but it works for the episode, because once again you're sort of like, well, he's supposed to be a good guy, but is he really a good guy, even though other people around him might be not be nice as well? So once again, it's really interesting. And there's a moment in this as well, a bit like a moment from the a previous episode. I can't remember what bloody one it is, but it's one of those things where it sort of like gets straight to the point, because of because it's only, you only get short runtime. Like, there's a lot in this episode. Like, this is one of those episodes that could have actually been like an hour, or you could probably try and actually make a feature film out of this. Hour and a half movie, if you could like flesh out the story. It's an interesting story, and you've got interesting characters, and it's fun, and you could definitely, so it is one of those episodes that I did absolutely want more of. But there are like the moments where they're like, of course we can't make this a movie length episode, so we've got to make it like half an hour. So there's like a moment with a policeman who, like, he is the one, when they like present the evidence, or she presents or whatever evidence to this policeman, to this cop, he like believes it straight away. So there's like, here's somebody that is, of course, has to be like, he's obviously grounded in reality. He's like, well, things can't like that be real. They're, you know, but he believed it, and that made me laugh, because once again, it's just purely about like the whole runtime thing, where you're like, oh shit, like, we've got to make an hour, half an hour out of this, rather than an hour and a half. Let's just make the cop believe every fucking thing that's wild it's going on. He's going to believe it straight away, and that's really funny, and that makes me laugh. And also, one of the things that's sort of fun about this episode as well, once again, it could be to do with the writers thinking like they're the coolest people in the world. I don't know, but the guy, he's pretty much like a nerd. and he's got some absolute moves. He's got some proper game when it comes to chatting up women. You know, this woman, yeah, he's definitely out of his league, but he charms her and he wins her over. And then, of course, you know, obviously he doesn't necessarily do it in the nicest way, not to her, but what he's, you know, cheating on his wife and not being the greatest person, like I said. But he's got some moves. You got to give it to him. And the music in this episode is really fun, unlike a lot of episodes, sort of weirdly enough, in sort of like the later part of season two or throughout season two. The music has been like sort of overpowering. Also, there are episodes as well that I've already spoken about where the music is just fucking annoying and I don't want it anymore. Whereas this one, the music really goes with what's happening in the episode. It's just a lot more fun, and I do really like that. There's a moment in it as well where you get like a creature sort of that comes out of a fridge. Yeah, it sounds really weird, and there's kids like around, and they open the fridge or whatever, and basically a slime creature comes out. It looks really cool. I like it. But that's one of the other things, the other strength of this episode is that you have really cool practical effects that are just throughout. You know, you've got like the monsters that are really cool. You know, the practical effects throughout the whole episode is just really, it's just a really fun episode that has a really intriguing, a really unique story. I love the fact that they go so meta in it, and it does still feel like a very sort of Tales from the Crypt episode. But I do like the fact that, and once again, this, I don't know if this is just me, I don't know, or whether it's the intentions of when they wrote it, but I do really like the fact that we sort of, I feel very sort of like different towards this character when we get to the end of it, because I sort of almost feel like he doesn't deserve the happy ending that he gets, because in this episode he essentially gets the happy ending. He gets the girl, even though he's already married. He lets his wife get killed by a big monster that's dressed the same as her. You know, it's so weird that they look at this person as like, this is a good person. Or I don't know whether that was the point of it, where they're trying to make us think of that sort of thing. You know, I don't know whether it's the writers that like writing this character and going, well, he's a good guy compared to his wife, and he should be able to go and have an affair and do whatever he wants. Or whether they're like, well, we want to make people feel a little bit confused as to how they're supposed to feel about this character, because as we know, a lot of the time Tales from the Crypt is, you know, we have our main character who's not very nice, and they, once again, the word that I say throughout every episode, they get their comeuppance. But in this, he doesn't, even though he's not necessarily a good guy. That doesn't mean that the other people around him aren't worse than him or aren't doing bad things. But he doesn't really go about what he's been doing with the affair and, you know, basically like, right, you know, getting his wife killed and stuff like that. He's not a good guy, but he gets a good ending for a good guy that he isn't. So it's interesting, this episode. But it just makes the episode a lot more interesting because we don't necessarily get. I mean, as I said, the interesting part is whether like they wrote it and they were like, this is like the one where we're going to make, you know, the good guy in it have a good ending, you know, rather than it being, you know, they get their comeuppance. Or they were like, we are purposely writing it as in you're supposed to feel like a little bit conflicted how you feel about this, because it is, you do feel a bit, I know that I do feel a bit conflicted, because I'm like, yeah, his wife isn't a good person, but he is the one that is like cheating on her and gets her murdered by bringing a drawing to life, and that's sort of like him drawing her and how he looks at her and so on like that. So he's not a good guy, and then he gets the good ending. So it's an interesting episode, but what it is a very fun, very creative, very unique episode with great practical effects. It looks good. So once again, not knowing what anybody else thinks about this episode, for me, this is getting a 5 out of 5 creepy cackles, the highest possible creepy cackle rating that you can get. Not many episodes have got that so far, and as I said, I'm trying to be very sort of cautious of what I'm giving the highest rating or low ratings and so on like that, because like I said, at the end of every season I want to be ranking and giving you sort of overall what my favorite episode of that season is, and then also you can all tell me what your favorite episode of that season is. But season 2 so far, there's not been a lot of them that have had 5 out of 5. So once I'm gonna have a lot of thinking to do, because once I get to the end of it and be like, right, but this one's got 5 out of 5, this one has as well, what's my favorite? It's going to make sort of giving you what is my favorite one, you know, more interesting maybe. Well, it is for me. It might not be for you, but it is for me. But I'm looking forward to doing that. But as of right now, this episode gets 5 out of 5 creepy cackles. Really fun one, and it is one of those ones where like the monsters and stuff like that. Once again, it's like the iconography of Tales from the Crypt of not just the Crypt Keeper, but the things that happen in the episode, the things that make the episode. They're the things that you like always stick out when you're like thinking of certain episodes and so on. So yeah, I love this episode, 5 out of 5. But let's move into episode 14. So episode 14 is called Lower Birth. Enoch, probably pronounced completely wrong, a gentle two-headed sideshow performer, falls deeply in love with Myrna. I don't fucking know. A 4,000-year-old Egyptian mummy that the carnival has acquired. The carnival owner, Clint, or Kling, whatever it is, plans to steal the priceless necklace adorning the mummy, unaware that a curse is attached to it that will castrate any man, I don't want that, who attempts to take it. This one is going to be a really quick one because honestly, I don't really like this episode. I think production-wise, it looks pretty good. Like you've got good set pieces or set design. Sorry, you've got the Egyptian mummy that looks good, and then you've got the two-headed sideshow performer. The performance of that character Enoch, I think that might be right, is very good. And the sort of like the way that it looks, the two-sided head sort of thing, the animatronic side of it, it looks good. It does look real, to be honest. So they do a really good job of it. But the episode itself, for me, it just doesn't really work. And I think obviously the circus setting does hinder that a little bit because I don't know, it just feels like we always end up having a circus sort of setting at some point in so many different things, not just Tales from the Crypt, and it always feels like a little bit cheap to me. I don't know why, it just does, but this one doesn't really do too much for me personally. As I said, the prosthetics, the animatronic face, that looks very good. As I said, he delivers a good performance through that. You've got in this as well. You've got the guy who plays the world's greatest hype man from Alien 2. He's in this, and he's also English in this. But in real life, he's not English, but he does a pretty good convincing. I mean, yeah, it's a little bit like the upper class sort of English accent that a lot of Americans do. Make us sound posher than some common as muck person like me. But he does do a really good job. So and he's very persuasive in this episode, so he does a really good job. But this one, it once again, we're back to having really fucking annoying music. The music in this one really annoyed me, and there's a lot of dialogue in this one. Once again, it's a dialogue heavy episode rather than like making more interesting moments in as the story. Once again, like, it's interesting how they do these episodes because sometimes they ramp it up constantly throughout because they're like, we know we've got 30 minutes, so this is the idea and we're going to keep evolving it throughout, but we're going to do it quickly and then we get to the end. Whereas sometimes it feels like they only really like know the core concept of what the episode is, like what the story, the idea, the concept is, and then they have like the moments where they're like, well, this is how it's going to end. Or like, this is how it starts, this is how it's going to end. But they do a lot of the things, and they do this in obviously full feature films as well, where they forget about the middle or the little bits in between the start and the end and the middle, And this is one of those episodes where it feels like they knew what they wanted to do, but they knew the big moments of the episode, and the other moments didn't really matter too much. So they shoved a lot of dialogue in there, and that's the problem with this one, because then you're like, it just becomes a little bit boring until you get to obviously the moments where like the bigger moments in it. But also, like, it does feel pretty generic, this one. There's nothing really that stands out to me in this one to draw you in to go, well, that's like a unique or creative way of looking at this sort of thing that we've seen before. This sort of feels pretty standard as well, but there are some good things, there are some pretty bad things. As I said, it's interesting but boring, and that's pretty much it. It's not really, it just feels flat. It's an episode that feels sort of flat for me. It feels like a filler episode. So, but then also the thing that sort of stands out of this episode is because what we don't realise until we get to the end is that this one is the twist of this one is that it's essentially the origin story of the Crypt Keeper, because at the end we see a baby Crypt Keeper. which is cool and wild, and it's interesting that they choose this one to essentially be the origin of the Crypt Keeper, because as an episode, it doesn't really like, it doesn't like throw hints in there and stuff like that to like this is who it's gonna be. It just is its own episode, and then they shove that in at the end to be like, fuck you, here we go. um so that's cool. I don't know. This one, I'm going to give it like 2 out of 5 creepy cackles, purely because once again, it's like the artistry that goes into it. Not necessarily the story and the idea itself, and also the dialogue is too dialogue heavy this episode. But I do like the production design within reason. As I said, I don't necessarily like the setting of a circus, because it just feels like it's done before all the time, and it feels very cheap sometimes. But I think they did a good job with what they had, and I do like the animatronic two-headed circus performer of Enoch. I don't know how to say his name, but I like how that looks, and the performer does a great job through that. But it just falls flat. As I said, it's not a great episode. It feels like a filler episode, and then of course we get that crazy ending. So 2 out of 5 creepy cackles for this one. Let's move into episode 15. So episode 15 is called Mute Witness to Murder. Susan Hastings witnesses a brutal murder across the street and is so traumatized that she loses her voice. The psychological terror deepens when her husband unknowingly calls the killer. This is an interesting one. This is a sort of, well, it's not a fun one in regards to it, because it's a pretty sort of heavy episode, but in regards to like, it's just a very, very well put together episode. And actually, the core concept of it is actually pretty terrifying. It is that sort of classic sort of Rear Window story, like it says in sort of the brief synopsis I did. But it's very brutal, and it escalates really quickly. And the look on her face, like when she's witnessing it as well, is absolutely like sort of brilliant. Like it's really sort of like well sold, but also like over the top at the same time. So it's like fun. But the fact that like the shock of it turns her mute is an interesting idea. And then of the fact that the person that is the killer ends up being the doctor, and she can't speak, and obviously he's the killer. It not only is like makes for a really interesting story where you're like, well, where is this going to go, how is she going to get out of this, but also it's actually truly quite terrifying as a concept, because there is nothing that she can really do about it, and he can do whatever he wants and say whatever he wants to her, and it's pretty messed up as a storyline itself. Is actually quite a terrifying concept. In this one, Richard Thomas, who you would know, he was in It, as well as, of course, many other things. The original It, as I said, is many other things. He's the guy that plays the doctor and the murderer. He's very good in this. There is like touches of like moments where I'm like, oh, it's a bit like Jeffrey Combs in this. But and he's got like his slick back hair sort of thing. But he's very good in this. He plays the psychopath very well. But also, I like the fact that he sort of feels quite unique. Like psychopaths, they're pretty easy to play in a way, because you do, you can be the crazy psychopath, or the psychopath that's walking around in everyday existence, who ends up just being one but doesn't sort of act like one. There's different variations of how you can play that role, but he plays it really well, where he's almost doing both of them. And I do really like that. There's a little bit like, the Patrick Bateman side of him, as I said, like the madness of Jeffrey Combs and stuff like that. But he does a really good job in it, and it sells the episode more, and it makes it more terrifying, because this guy is absolutely off his rocker, and has done and will do some very horrible things to somebody that can do nothing about it, because she's stuck in this mental asylum. Also, talking about mental asylums, I never want to go into one, of course, but they do always look like really comfortable. Like the padded cells. It's basically like just sleeping in a room of just beds. So no, I don't ever want to go in one, but they always make them look really comfortable in like movies. So as horrible as the situation is, you could probably have a really lovely nap. But I don't ever want to go in one. But yeah, so this one, you already start off, it's already interesting, it's already very brutal, it's already really sort of terrifying and unsettling in regards to the story and the fact that she can't do anything because she can't speak. He is, the psychopathic killer who can do whatever he wants because he, runs the mental institution. And it's just one of those that sort of like builds up that sort of tension and dread that you sort of feel in you. It does a really good job of that. Sadly, I think that even though you have all of this, it does that thing that a lot of these episodes do, where it knows what it's doing at the start, knows what it's doing at the end, but it feels a lot of the stuff in the middle. It sort of falls a little bit flat, and then you have the odd little moment, but it just, once again, it's just an episode that falls a little bit flat in the middle, but it has a lot of like the interesting stuff to sort of make up for it. But it's just a little bit of a shame that they just felt like they didn't know what to do so much in the middle. They're like, we know what we want to do with the start, and we know what the story is. We know how we want to end it. Well, what do we do in the middle, where we sort of figure that out as we go? And that's always sort of a shame, because this episode didn't benefit from that whatsoever, because you could have been, if you structure that middle part of this episode better, then it would have been even better. But also, I can't say a lot of negative stuff about this episode, because it really does deliver on what it's trying to. It just falls a little bit flat, which is an absolute shame. But it said, I also, one of the things that I do like about this episode is that once again it differs from the normal format of what these episodes are. We sort of had that with one of the other previous episodes, even though once again questionably, is that guy a good guy? But in this one, this poor woman who turns mute because of what she's seen, she's not a bad person. So it's interesting that she is like our main character. You've got her husband, although there is a really weird bit where like the husband is at home talking out loud to himself, because like we need to, the viewer, us, we need to sort of know what he's thinking. They didn't need to add it in whatsoever, and once again, they probably shouldn't, but they just literally have a scene of him just sitting there talking out loud about the situation that's going on, and you're like, that's a bit weird. But yeah, but predominantly our main characters obviously is the killer, and this the woman in it, and she, obviously great performance from her. But I do like the fact, once again, that it's turning the tables a little bit, where it's on us, where it's like we're following the good character rather than the bad person, where bad things are going to happen to them. The other character in this is the bad character, and our main character is the good one. And then of course it's about that other person getting their comeuppance at the end. And I do like it, and they sort of, it's once again, it's sort of like a good person is getting a happy ending within reason, because she is basically, she obviously kills this guy and stuff. But also it's like sort of like justified for her, but at the same time it ends on her in the mental asylum. So then also you're like, well, how good can it be with her? So it's one of those things that she probably, for the episode, the way that it ends, she sort of gets a good ending in regards to us as a viewer. Like, yes, she got her own back on the bastard, but at the same time, it probably still didn't end very good for her, because of where she is, unless she can figure it out completely. And now she can speak again. She can be like, right, this is what happened. And then they're like, right, you're all cleared. You're good to go. And that's what we hope for her as a character. But it doesn't end that way, which I like, because it's more ambiguous that way, isn't it? Because you're like, well, fingers crossed for her. Hopefully it worked out all right. But you don't actually know 100% whether it did. But I do like this, and also it's another example of when you do an episode that's very well structured, very well written, a good concept, a good idea. It doesn't always have to be about ghosts, ghouls, and goblins. This doesn't have a supernatural element. It's just a bad person doing horrible things, and somebody gets caught up in the middle of it and loses her voice, and because of that, it creates a more terrifying and more haunting sort of story around it. And you're like, yeah, because it's a situation you never want to be in, apart from the fact that the mental asylum does look like it's just a room of nice comfy beds, which I don't want to go into ever. But yeah, it's a good episode. It's a very good episode. I think the only thing that holds this episode back from being a 5 out of 5 creepy cackles is purely, it felt like they didn't necessarily know too much what they wanted to do with the middle. They nailed the ending. They had a really good start, really good story, great performances throughout, but it just felt flat a little bit in the middle. and felt like they didn't really know what to do until they got to the bits where they did know what to do. So overall, this one is 4 out of 5 creepy cackles. Not quite the 5, but it's still very, very good. This is a very successful episode. It just missed that beat a little bit. But there we go. So that is another 3 episodes from season 2. I really hope that you're enjoying this. As I said, I'm enjoying going through them. I hope you're enjoying how, what I'm talking about in regards to how I feel about them. But also, as I keep saying, they're not going to be how you feel about it. And I do still want to know how you feel about it. So on this episode, if you know these episodes, let me know in the comments or go onto our socials. Let me know what you think about the episodes that I've spoken about on this episode of Tales from the Creepzone. But we keep going through season 2. There's not many left of season 2, and then we keep going through the rest of the seasons of Tales from the Crypt. And then I hope that you'll continue to join me through it. But let me know if you're enjoying it, and also let me know what your favorite sort of episodes are so far, and let me know what you think about the episodes I've spoken about. But until next time, stay creepy, fuckers.